Next up, we have Bernard Mallat. Bernard Mallat is the founder and senior partner at Bernard Mallat Architects. He is a registered architect in both the US and Lebanon. He attended the University of Maryland in the US for both his undergraduate and graduate studies in architecture and design. He has since then produced works in numerous countries. He has also lectured and taught various courses in design and architecture in several institutions for over 25 years, and has been a part-time faculty member and lecturer since 2003 at the American University of Beirut. His activities include architecture, interior design, stage design, urban design, and object design. And today, we are honored to have him with us today. Bernard Mallat, the stage is yours.
All right, well, I guess this image is for Charles. Lebanon is dead, basically. I mean, for all intents and purposes, really, we're not very far from there. No electricity, generator pollution, garbage crisis, all sorts of things that are wonderful in this place. So we're going obviously from crisis to crisis, fuel, immigration, inflation, debt. You know, this is what was happening to our office actually in the last few weeks. So we were not even able to operate during the day because the generator suppliers had started rationing. You know, essentially the state is useless. It still does very few things, and it does them very badly. So, you know, for society that exists, generally, you need a government. You need services. You need infrastructure. What are we to do? You know, we go around calling them inept, incompetent, failures, useless, and so on. Although Charles was making another point, which is that we are actually the ones who are projecting this onto them, and it's not the case. Although I'd argue that basically, if our fearless leaders and Lebanon-loving leaders were spies and traitors at destroying the country. So I'm not entirely sure I agree with Charles on his assessment, but I'm not talking about maybe government employees, but instead I'm talking about you know, the big ones up there, the politicians, the ones who play that game. Now, you know, after the sad things that Charles told us, you know, I could sit and complain, which I, you know, would love to, but I wanted to speak to the fact that people are leaving, and students who graduated recently are wondering what to do. And I want to point out that living and working in Europe or the United States or any civilized country is definitely easier than staying here. But the truth is, it doesn't challenge you. And you will find that out if you leave. And people who have left, it doesn't challenge you the way this country does. And in a way, you know, a useful human being is a creative human being. Einstein once said, I believe he said, don't try to be a person of success, try to be a person of utility, of use. So, you know, a place like Lebanon where there are so many problems is actually the epicenter of opportunity. There's so many problems here in Europe and in the States and in places like that. They're inventing problems to solve because they've got it easy. We've got so many things to do here that all of you who are graduating should, if you can survive, you should stay here. You should look to try to find solutions. It's inspiring. There's just so many things to work on, so many things to do that, and Karim showed us in a way how to do it. And we all contribute in different ways. We contribute in the ways we can. I teach actually at the UB with Karim, and we contribute also by teaching, but in a private practice, it's a different story, and I'll talk about that instead of the beautiful projects that Karim did. I will talk about private projects funded by rich people, of course, and but I will focus a little bit more on some of the techniques and the strategies we need to use because of the situation and things that are happening. So I'll talk about sustainability. I'll talk about some of these things which are actually solutions to many of our problems. I mean, in a sense, we need to get off-grid. We need to just not use government anymore, in a way. If they can't be here, instead of all you leaving, you can come in and start doing things in Lebanon using techniques that are that we use in private projects. And again, a lot of them cost money, but some don't. Some are just clever ways of doing things. And I will start with very simple stuff. These are some projects that we worked on recently. But of course, most of our projects have stopped. So, most architects in the room with Bernard telling them, why don't you stay, are thinking, you're an asshole. Why are you saying this when, you're saying most projects have stopped. But, obviously, solar, things like that, we're using this kind of thing on projects. I'm not even going to go through the entire projects. I'll take a simple example. This is a project that we're doing right next to the backyard, which we've designed as well. And, here, this was designed during the crisis, the COVID crisis, right? So one more crisis to add to our problems. But the whole rooftop is photovoltaic panels. We've planted the roofs. We've made a lot of outdoor spaces because, during COVID, there was being confined indoors was a problem. So we created outdoor offices and rooftops that are used, a lot of plants. We had to use, of course, other types of technologies in the ducting and using ultraviolet and things like that to try and change air changes and things like that to be able to purify the air and make sure that people don't get COVID. But some of these things may become the norm or may not. Again, another project that was stopped but is on hold. So a lot of these things probably will kick back and start again shortly after, if this crisis ends at some point. Anyway, I don't want to go too far talking about this, but what I will do is talk about actually the backyard right across the street from there. So in this project, many of you may have been there, maybe not, but we used a lot of techniques that are cheap, economical, because we obviously are living in an economic crisis, although this project was designed at a time where the economic crisis was not hitting us hard. But the reason we did this is this was a temporary project. This was a project that was, the people that built this project had rented the land for 17 years. And after 17 years, they have to return the project, the whole building, everything they built to the owners of the land. So basically, they weren't interested in spending a lot of money, considering they had to get their money back on their investment in a short time. So we were looking at ways to build cheaply, but making it interesting because we're architects and we've got to innovate. And like Karim said, obviously, beauty will save the world. And so we were trying different things, and I'd like to show you some of these things. Now, if we look at some of the elements that we all can contribute to, every single architect in Lebanon can do something about this, right? people take over the streets because we don't have parks, we don't have benches, we don't have places to sit and to hang out. So they put a plastic chair and a baule and they play in the middle of the street. So, you know, why can't we build benches on our buildings? Every single building in Beirut can have a bench, can have 2, 3 benches on the facade. We could do that. We did this in this project. So, and it was not intended for the customers. It was on the outside of the building, meant to cater to anybody walking down the street, wants to sit, lovers want to face each other and, you know, have a nice little sit down and chat. They can do it. And it's got nothing to do with making a profit or, you know, buying some, consuming some goods. So this project started doing things like that. We had impromptu events, kids having fun on it. We created a bunch of benches. This is another one on the facade as well outside, used generally by the staff. So it's not, or somebody walking by, but it was amusing. I mean, we made this small enough to have kids sit and, or for adults. So, but the way this place is being used, and what is it that prevents every one of us architects to design on our buildings a bench and a garbage can built into the building and lights so we can light the street? We don't need the government. They're not there anyway. And if we count on their lights, we're going to end up in open, I don't know, manholes and so on. So, you know, we custom designed the lighting in the project. Everything was concrete, so it's very raw, rough. Not that, I mean, not kept. We noticed when my partner and I would walk down Gemese and other places that the quality of the walls in the city, these old things that are kind of rotting but are great at the same time, these attract us. For some reason, everybody goes down to these old buildings, to these old places. And we thought, how the hell could we capture this when making a new building? And so we started thinking about texture, and we started thinking about relief, and, you know, thought, okay, no money, no problem. Let's just leave the concrete raw as it is, leave the ridges, leave everything. And concrete generally, you know, as you pour it, you have forms and you have these metal pieces that stick out, right? Those tie rods to tie the formwork together. So we thought, okay, why don't we clean them up? Instead of cutting them off, typically they're being cut off, plastered, and painted over, and you don't see any of this. We thought, no, we'll leave them, paint them, clean them up, and we made them into a hairy facade, if you like. So we have this building that is using, actually upcycling the materials instead of cutting them and throwing them away or remelting them and using lots of energy. You know, this is being used in the facade, cost close to nothing, you know, and it can make for something that is appealing, at least to us. I mean, you may or may not agree, but it seems people are responding pretty well to the project. So we used some of the same strategies for these bridges. We took the waste from the steel, from you know, columns and any steel that's being cut on the site, and this waste was used to create bridges. This is a structural bridge, and the structure is actually this hairy rebar. There's no actual structure, so it's just completely made of waste. We made these things. It's based on the principle of a truss, a space frame, if you like, but it's a randomized space frame. So it has on top of it basically a 4mm steel plate on recuperated steel rods, and it works perfectly well. So we have 2 bridges in the project, and they're, one is 7 meters, the other is 9 meters, and we had to do this. It was experimental. And only one man, a welder, worked on this. We would drop by every day and tell him, you know, add some metal here, add some metal there. You know, it looks a little empty here. Make sure you have a certain distance between your welds. And that was it. And we tested it. We had to load it. Of course, it's experimental. But what's interesting is if you had to build this, I suppose, in Vienna or somewhere else, it would require some major approvals. It would require certifications. It would require computers to be able to figure out the angle of every single one of these rods. But we did this totally differently, right? We did it the Lebanese way. Cheap labor, easy, you know, and dropping by, and we experimented. We loaded it with concrete blocks, 500 kilos at a time, up to 5 tons for this one, for example, and it worked perfectly well. So what I'm suggesting is if we get clever and we try to design in a different way in this difficult crisis, then we can offer our clients, you know, or the public, or depending on what kind of projects we're working on, we can provide things that are done innovative and yet are, you know, are not this expensive thing that requires that we have a healthy economy and that everything is going well. So, I mean, I'll show a couple more images, you know, some of the interiors, the concrete, raw, some of the mood, of course, a lot of landscape involved in here. Imajmail was the landscape architect with us, but greenery is extremely important, especially in a raw concrete building. So, but what I think is important about this project is how you can, with very little, produce something that is nice, at least I think, that is practical. We've done this we use the same technique for a little chapel in Brumana. This is an outdoor chapel, so it's made of rebar, completely recycled metal, and it creates a beautiful space and utilizes very, very little material and costs very little. Now, I will go to maybe something that we designed, I'd say, what was it, 12 years ago, 10 or more? Solaris. We designed this tower, and again, you might think a tower. Nobody's going to build a tower today. But if we were, first of all, had it been built, had it continued, excuse me, this project would have been quite apropos, because it was using rainwater collection, you know, LED lighting, all these things, and this is way back when. So all the technologies that were being used in this building would have made this building perfect today, because it was off-grid. It was, if I show you the facades, let me go to the, I mean, greenery is throughout the building, so this building was completely greened, and the facade looks, to some people, ugly, but what it is all the black and gray panels are photovoltaic panels. You have photovoltaic panels and something called PCP panels, which are water heating elements. And this thing would have been a building that wouldn't need anything from the government again. You know, no electricity, no water required. It was fully operational. And what was interesting about, another interesting feature now is the concept itself. We were creating a vertical village, right, a vertical neighborhood, so we had these streets. The stair is really the equivalent of a street going up. These gardens are kind of common gardens. So this whole tower was meant to be a little neighborhood that was self-sustaining, right? It could survive on its own. And this is the kind of architecture I think we need today, because obviously we run out of electricity constantly, or water, or we don't have places to stay. So we try to create this microcosm in there. And an interesting part of it is that the lot is 1,973 square meters. And we managed, I mean, if we had made it a park, that's what it would be, 1,973 square meters of greenery. But after building 20,000 square meters, we obtained 132% of that as green space. So we had 2,600 square meters or more of green space. This means that the OEA, for example, could pass regulations that say, that impose on any person building a tower to restore at least 100% of the footprint of the lot as green area in their building. It can be done. We've done more than 100%. So I don't see why we can't change the regulations that Charles was talking about that have been around for years. So there are things that architects can do and should do, and obviously we don't need the government to mandate or the OEA to mandate these things. We can do them voluntarily, but most people will not do them voluntarily. So that's why we sometimes need to do these kinds of things. I will switch to another country, since obviously nowadays to survive we're being forced to take some work outside. We have some work in Lebanon, but a lot of it is on hold. We are designing things, but I'm not sure they will necessarily be built. People put things on hold. You know, they make us design them and put them on hold. So I will talk about, I mean, we designed something in the Caribbean, in Grenada, the island of Grenada. Now, again, I'm not going to go through the whole project and the concept, but basically we built hill units. It's a hotel, basically. And we built these things like into the hill. We try to have a minimal impact. We landscaped extensively, obviously. So all these units are kind of built into the hills and landscaped. And the concrete that you see, the white concrete, is treated with, let me go back here. It's treated with titanium oxide. So titanium oxide in concrete is a very interesting technology. Now, it's self-cleaning and it purifies the air. So today, Beirut, which is constantly built in concrete, as long as you expose the concrete, if you use titanium oxide, you can help purify the air. So a combination of things like solar instead of all these generators that are strangling us. And by the way, the WHO suggests that I think the average CO2 production of a nation in the world is about 4 tons of CO2 per person. And Lebanon has 25 tons per person. And we're not an industrialized nation. Now, normally, I think the US, which is a highly industrialized nation, has like maybe 15 tons of CO2 per person. So it's crazy that a place like this that has no industry or small industries ends up producing so much CO2. We're gonna like die of pollution. And in fact, I think the WHO says the #1 factor in a healthy life for people in cities is the clean air. So, all right, this is one way we could probably contribute to helping things, of course, with eliminating all these generators. Again, it's not in our power, but as architects, you know, the only thing I can talk about is the little things that we can do. Now, some of these things have a big impact if adopted by a lot of people, and some don't. But, you know, a project like this one, you know, I mean, I'll show quickly some of these things. Maybe, you know, most of the buildings are integrated in nature, planted over. We use wood and concrete. We've got, I mean, constantly, they're quite similar. I mean, the materials are quite unified. The Hill Restaurant. So these things, again, the concrete is doing its job. It's on all the roofs, but nature is also everywhere. And it's a beautiful place to be, and things are integrated. And I will go back to other projects to see what we can talk about. And we have a little project in Ain al-Rumani, for example, that we did that was, again, utilizing some of these very basic things, right? Ain al-Rumani is a low-income neighborhood or middle-income neighborhood, high density. So we started thinking, how can we make a building with, again, a low budget? It's exactly the situation right now. There's not a lot of money. What do we do and how do we give with a small budget? You know, we don't want one more of these buildings with stone cladding and, I don't know, nice lobby and whatever. So, you know, we figured, okay, let's go and look at this neighborhood and see what it's like. And if we give them a box or something like that, a standard building with standard windows, what people are going to do is, you know, they're going to turn it into somewhat more of a mess, right? So why don't we start there? And we start making it messy. So we thought, okay, let's take a building and let's take low-cost solutions, plumbing. Let's stick them on the outside, on the facade of the building. let's make it messy before they do, right? Let's put the plumbing outside. They're going to come in and put AC units on their buildings. So let's take the AC units and start putting them on the buildings ourselves. Let's locate them, connect them to drainage, put signage, right? They have color, so we'll probably end up putting color there, right? You know, we messed around with different colors. We thought about, okay, let's identify each AC unit with, for example, it might be 6L for 6th floor living room, whatever. So, or you know, whatever. We have sociocultural customs in Lebanon, right? We use the salli because we don't have electricity. And again, this is all over happening. This was, you know, this is a habit that was developed, I think, in the 50s or the 40s. I'm not sure. But when they started having tall buildings and no elevators, etc. So now we have the same problem because we have no electricity and we haven't had it for a long time. So we thought, all right, every apartment should have a salli, right? A little basket. And it can, you know, if you forget your wallet or whatever, then you call your dad or your mom upstairs and they'll just drop this. We also thought about barrels. People use barrels or use little cans of milk or whatever, think it needle, and put little plants, haba, za'atar, whatever, to put on their balconies. So we thought, okay, let's do it before they do. Let's start putting, you know, barrels. You know, and we can plant them and you know, distribute them on the facade. Use local plants, za'atar, whatever, parsley, anything one wants. Anyway, so we experimented with this. We experimented with colors. In the end, the building ended up black and white. It was more or less this. This is more or less the final outcome that we got. But basically, I'm trying to show this one because, again, if we want to make an effort or do something, perhaps we can do something low cost, and yet it doesn't mean it has to be uninteresting. It doesn't mean that if we don't have the money, the project is no good. And this is a dilemma that we all face. You know, we all want big budgets, and we want, you know, wonderful clients who understand us. And well, let's face it, they understand money much better than they will understand us. So since we're talking Lebanon, I'll go to another one, for example, that we designed in Dahi. This is at the beginning of the, oops. But okay, I'll go through that in a different way. So this is in Dahi. Client came to us. There's a building that they already designed, basically a mall, and they had towers on top of it. So we, you know, in the middle of the southern suburbs that had been bombed, and we're told, okay, we want you to help us improve the facades, change, and we started struggling with the idea. Obviously, we didn't design the building from scratch, so there was this, and half actually by the time we got there, half the mall was built, and we started thinking about what we could do. And we had a number of options. There was a couple of buildings that were more like clinics or offices, and the rest was residential. So these towers, we created this one tower on the corner that was a commercial tower, obviously glass on the north side, but on the south it was protected with plants and screening and other things. But the interesting, I mean, there are a couple of options for this. This was a fully perforated metal facade, again, for shading and such. We were playing with metaphors of bullets and explosions, of course, after, you know, building in Dahi, but, you know, it wasn't necessarily the favorite thing of the client as an idea. But, you know, we experimented, and I'm showing you some of the experiments here. Integration of plants. There was some conventional stuff, like, but it was, you know, trying to be political, colorful, Hezbollah, whatever, or whoever you like. You know, we did offer them many different options, right? We black and white, simple stuff. We you know, green, blue. So we had fun and just played with this, but of course, you know, a simple white and greenery was our go-to. But really, if we look at the most interesting one for me, and this is the one that we wanted to go with, is this one. So we started looking again at Beirut and the klostra and this device that's used all over Beirut since the 50s. And we thought, why not integrate this into the facade? So we started looking at making the residential facade do that, and of course, greenery and provide shade. So it's sustainable and it's not expensive. And if you look at this building, maybe it looks like it's been hit by a few rockets, but it's actually quite functional. It works well and is sustainable and creates a lot of shade. So this was one of our favorites going in, but it was an economic way of doing a building. It does look like it's been bombed out, but maybe that'll avoid the Israelis bombing it again. You know, I don't know. So, but these are some of the atmosphere shots of this thing. I'm going to try to, obviously, now that, well, this is a project in Saudi Arabia. I'm not sure it's appropriate. Again, it's appropriate only in some of the techniques we use. Now, we use some of the strategies that could be used here. Now, this thing is a multi-purpose hall and assembly halls in Saudi Arabia, and I mean, some of the techniques that we used are used with it, are I think maybe appropriate to the climate we have in Lebanon, and this kind of curtain that can help shade and bring a breeze, and you know, use passive systems rather than active systems is an interesting thing, and perhaps relevant, perhaps not. But since I'm showing you what kind of work I mean, some of you who are graduating and might go in offices might be doing, because you know, obviously we have some work in Lebanon, and people will be doing more work abroad than here for the next few years. Although, if you work with Karim, you'll definitely get to contribute, you know, in a more significant way to this country. So anyway, we had another option that was actually, let me go back here. This option was, it was based on the idea of a gemstone being in the desert, and we wanted the building to speak, so we're talking about semantics, language. So we used barcodes actually to create this other option. And it's actually the two facades, if you photograph them, actually you can decode it and say that see that it says Saudi Arabia or a new future or something like that. But the building was designed based on this barcode, on these barcodes. So the facades, at least, of the buildings were created as such. If you look at the way this thing comes together, it's doing that. It's, of course, again, using titanium dioxide in the concrete to be self-cleaning and to purify the air. But obviously that's not necessarily what this project is about, right? It's in the desert in Saudi Arabia, and it's sculptural, and I'm not sure I should be showing it in this lecture. But, all right, I've gone ahead and done that. I'm not going to go through all of this. Let me go back. Unfortunately, all my hyperlinks are not properly, excuse me. Okay, we go back to our buddy. And, okay, something we're doing in Beirut again now. It probably will be built, although we just finished the execution drawings. We don't know. The client is saying they'll probably build it. They're not sure exactly when. Probably soon, but we'll see. So this is another cluster. obviously, after the backyard, we got a little known for making these restaurant clusters, etc. So we're sort of taking advantage of it. But what's interesting about these projects, again, and what's relevant in this case, is that they're temporary. Right? I was explaining the fact that people rent a piece of land for a few years. For example, in this case, the client didn't rent the piece of land. They own it, but instead of building a tower that's, 15 floors or 12 floors, I'm not sure how much they can build on that lot anymore, they're just building a 2-story little cluster of restaurants and bars and a little shop, and there's some offices upstairs. So we started thinking about it as something that you can, well, actually, no, let me go back to the other proposal. This was a scaffolding system. So we thought, okay, this thing needs to move probably after they're done and they want to build their tower eventually. They're going to need to move the entire building, so why not use a scaffolding system? And we have a few variations, but these are just aesthetic. So we have a scaffolding system that holds up a bunch of boxes. So it's that simple. The offices are at the top, the restaurants and bars and whatever shops at the bottom. We create these shaded areas that are pleasant, and we have these catwalks. So the whole thing is dismantleable and can be taken away. And we thought this was a better concept. Actually, we had 2 proposals. The client went for another one, not this one, but it's still, it still is interesting because also we had to think of how to generate income, and we made it a bunch of billboards, right? So we built a bunch of billboards on top of the structure so that you could add either advertising or add income to the project through billboard advertising, right? So these things would either advertise the shops or our wonderful politicians, right? That's probably the only people that can afford to have billboards. So we had a bunch of, I think, variations on this. I'm trying to see, well, no, I'll go to the other option, which was actually adopted, and is the one that will be built. So it's all based on, in this case, something we call furnitecture. So it's kind of the architecture becoming furniture and other things, right? So it's these pipes that go everywhere, this structure that carries the billboards, and these pipes that become railings and become, carry plants, do everything. So it's a multi-purpose, if you want, element, right? The pipe does, becomes numbering, becomes railings, becomes seats, becomes lighting, it becomes plants, right? It does everything. It's this one element that goes throughout the project and kind of unites the project and makes it have its own identity. So this is the one basically that'll be built, but it has the same principle. It has the advertising that will supplement the income. It's cheap to build now. They may eliminate the perforated metal that we had added, and this is some of the offices upstairs. A night shot in Shafi now. Okay, this is a variation with colors. We had another variations without the perforated metal, but that's neither here nor there. But the pure concrete one is the cheapest and the one they might go with. All I could say is to everyone right now who's coming out of university or who's a young architect is, you've got to, if you're going to work in the private practice and not in something public like Karim was doing, which is what I recommend to anyone. Obviously, they should contribute to Lebanon. You've got to obviously think like, think differently. Think in a manner that you haven't thought of before when you were doing your design work in school or anywhere else, because the money's not there. It's not the same. How much time do I have left, or am I done? I have time. I'm not sure whether I should. Well, I'll show one last project, simply this one. Again, the same kind of idea. We used all sorts of sustainable solutions, right? We thought about the climate and the natural ventilation, passive shading, all these things, rainwater collection. So it ticks all the marks. Basically, if any of you know anything about LEED or BREEAM or some of these things, right? So all the tick marks are there, and they're more, more useful and more important than ever in a country like Lebanon, obviously. And we used to have a very hard time convincing clients to do this, but today, actually, we're managing to do that a lot more easily. So, oh, sorry, and I will just go directly to the perspectives. And it basically is a temple for food. This place is like, we made it to be a place where people would want to go and enjoy themselves. Obviously, as usual, landscaping is a big factor. But if you look at, let me go back to, where is it? Concept, yeah. So if we look a little bit at the site conditions, this is on Ramlat al-Baida, right, on the sea. But this piece of land is actually, it was actually owned by the American embassy before they moved to Aukar. So, they left there on their, on their big ships, and the Lebanese coast was our inspiration. The Lebanese coast is really not known for its sandy beaches. We're known more for this kind of industrial shore. It's not such a beautiful sandy shore, so we were looking at these things as our inspiration for the project. And so when we went back and thought about what we had to do, we realized in most of our F&B projects, there's a lot of mechanical. You have a lot of units, and you have to hide them in, on top of buildings, behind walls. You create all sorts of spaces and make enormous efforts to hide all this equipment. We thought, why don't we just expose it, right? So we thought we'd create these towers that have the water tanks, the gas tanks, mechanical units, etc. And these are what we called our CO2 towers. But we thought we needed to counteract this, and we created another set of towers that we called the O2 towers, the oxygen towers. So we had this counterpoint, and these towers would host trees and would host either solar or what do you call them? Some wind turbines, and so on. And if I actually show you the perspectives, a lot of these towers at the top have wind turbines, and that's in a sense what we call the O2 towers. So we used also photovoltaic panels and all these other things, but this project kind of took on its own character, and it sort of got this mixed industrial, I don't know, post-apocalyptic look, which is not inappropriate in Lebanon today. But of course, our client was extremely smart, and we were designing this about a year before the crisis. And at one point, he just came up to us and said, stop everything. We're like, what do you mean? We're almost finished the execution drawings. We're done. He goes, no, stop everything. I've taken all my money out of Lebanon, and I'm not leaving a cent here. I'm just leaving a little bit of money to petty cash, basically. And we were like, you're crazy. This is going to be a great project. You're going to make tons of money, or whatever. Obviously, he was in the know. He was much smarter than we were. And he had taken all his money out to London or I don't know where. And, he knew, like most rich people in the country or connected people, right? So, but this just gives you a bit of an idea of, the kinds of technologies or techniques you can use perhaps in a future project in Lebanon. But I think I'll stop there and see what everybody has to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernard.
Thank you.
You have a very rich portfolio filled with building typologies on it. That's quite enlightening. But which building typology, is your favorite to design, and why?
Well, to tell you the truth, it changes constantly, right? With the years, often my latest project is the one I'm most excited about. But I've got to say, the F&B projects, in a sense, to me, are interesting, or something like the backyard, because of the challenges of the money, because it's got to be cheap, because it's going to be destroyed in a few years, and what do you do? How you start? You're being forced to think about waste. You're thinking about sustainability. You're thinking about how do you keep this thing operating? You know, these people need or want to make money, right? And it actually resembles a lot of the challenges we have in general in Lebanon. So I'd say perhaps today this is one of my favorite things to work on. Although it's really the challenges that it creates that are interesting, not necessarily the project itself. I mean, but the public nature is also interesting, because you got to think about people. You got to think about what you can give back to the city. And so that's fun, because you know, unless you're working for an NGO, which is great, and I applaud Karim for it, but in a way, I feel like we're beggars. I'm so tired of having all these NGOs in Lebanon, and we're like these beggars begging for money to be able to do things in this country. I want us to try to get out of it. But unless you're doing these public projects, which are great for architects, right? We all want to be contributing to the public good. So the dream of architects is normally to either, you know, build a public project, a museum or something like that, or do things like what Karim is doing, really contributing to people who are suffering and helping them in some way. So institutions like AUB or other universities and NGOs are doing a great job. I don't mean to criticize them. I just, you know, I'm just thinking, you know, okay, as a little architect that has this practice and does a few projects, what's my contribution and how can I do something that is relevant? So that's when I get the happiest, right?
Yeah. And speaking of challenges, like right now with the technological advancements that are on the go when it comes to certifications for the buildings, such as GSAS, LEED, do you have clients that are actually aware and specify what they want for their buildings, or do you have to convince them, like most of the time, it's better to do this, it's better to do that? What's the nature of the clients that you're currently facing nowadays in the market?
Well, I mean, it varies a lot. Obviously, we do some work in the Gulf because we had to. We're expanding there, trying to get projects to be able to survive as an office. So the clients generally that are in the Gulf are more savvy. They are more aware of all these technologies, and these technologies are available in their countries, right? I mean, in Lebanon, we're still quite low tech. But as I pointed out for example, the bridges we did at the backyard or whatever, low tech doesn't mean bad, right? I mean, it is, in Lebanon, we don't have all this technology, so we can't do the kinds of things that they may do in Europe or in some of the Gulf countries, which have a lot of money. But if we're clever, we can take advantage of you know, the low cost of labor. We can take advantage of other things and think of waste as a resource, and we can make things that are interesting. But again, to answer your question specifically, these technologies that you're talking about are available only outside the country, not here.
Cool. And now off to the Q&A segment from the audience. Does anybody have any question to pose to Bernard? Yes.
Okay, I want to ask about sustainability. With greenery and the use of PV panels, what technology do you see necessary?
With the use of PV panels. I'm not sure I understood the question. So what? Well, what is more necessary, solar panels or greenery? I think both are essential. I mean, solar panels or PV panels are actually something we can't avoid anymore, right? I mean, Lebanon, actually, one great thing that happened with this crisis is the fact that we are all forced to adopt it, right? Before now, fuel was too cheap. I would talk to clients and you know, talk my life away trying to convince them to do things that are sustainable, and they didn't care because it was cheap. Energy was cheap. They didn't care, right? Now they do. Now they really care. And all of us are having to adopt it, and it's going to help us because it's going to clean our environment to a certain extent. Now we have to think about what we're going to do with those PV panels 30 years from now once they're you know, obsolete and they go in the garbage. We already have a garbage crisis, of course, so that's not going to help, but we'll probably figure out things to do with them. In terms of greenery, of course, I mean, it's essential. We need, I mean, it produces oxygen, so obviously, you know, it's essential for us to plant. I think, you know, our wonderful Lebanese army should be, you know, I don't know, 40, 50,000 people strong, should send out 10,000 soldiers planting a few trees every day. They could probably, you know, cover the country in a few years, and we could get back some of the greenery. But some of the laws that we have, building laws, are not very good, because outside in the suburbs we build and we spread these little houses that are 2 stories tall or whatever, and we take away trees. And I'm not sure. I think we have to rethink this. Most people think the city is not sustainable, but a city is actually, in my opinion, and even towers, which people criticize all the time, are, in my opinion, more sustainable than this practice of building in the suburbs. So, but as far as technologies are concerned, both are essential, and we can't think of one without the other, at least in my practice. Right?
Yeah, and even to add on the solar panel issue nowadays, something that you previously mentioned, which is the client is upfront not on board because of the expenses that he has to pay.
Yes.
But now we're kind of forced, in order to convince him, to show him how we can offset the expenses of the project in the future terms so that he can be on board eventually. So when he sees the ROI of what he is currently investing in terms of technologies, and when he sees the offsetted expenses in the project itself, he will definitely be on board later on. So
well,
I guess
actually,
that's the strategy.
You're absolutely right, but it's a no-brainer for solar now because of the cost of generators. I mean, you can get your money back in 2.5 years. Normally, it's a 10-year thing, a 10-year thing to get your money back. You can get it in 2-3 years. You've got your money back, so it's a no-brainer. Now we can convince the clients. It's like we don't even need to say anything. They're like, yeah, we'll do that. But there are other technologies, obviously, that are more of a hard sell. There are digital twins. There's lots of things that you can do with computers that are very useful, and monitoring and you know, long-term.
Yeah, actually, digital twin is part of what we're currently doing in the company, which is trying to do a digital twin for every project that we're doing in order to see how it can operate, to offset expenses. One project actually is NEOM for NEOM, so which is what you previously showcased. A different project, of course, but yeah, that's the idea. So, and unless anybody has any other question for Bernard?
We'll take a break. There is.
The gentleman over there, please.
Sorry, I want to thank you, Mr. Bernard, and
thank you.
It's working, and Mr. Karim, of course, and Mr. Shah. I just want to. I'm not going to ask something. I'm going to ask for something, because I see all this enlightening, and we are being fascinated, and we're actually getting used. And we are here now, right now. We're sharing knowledge. We are sharing knowledge, and with your experiences, we're getting this knowledge, and we're going to think rightful. We're going to put on some movement in our careers and moving on. But what we lack initiative. We lack getting us together. We're here sharing knowledge, but we don't have an initiative. Why don't we put 10% resources of each person's resources that he has, and just, I don't know, make a WhatsApp group that's called Let's Do Something, and just go down and inspire people to do initiatives. We're doing initiatives outside of our country, but we're not doing anything here. We do something like minimal things, but we don't have much groups coming together. That's the whole reason why we are separated, and we do not combine our resources. We're always me. We're not us, and that's the whole problem that we're not solving. So I just want to ask of you, and ask of all these great minds that we are listening to today, to do more initiative, and please ask the youth. We are here. We don't have anything. Actually, we're spending our time on social media and wasting our times. So we are energetic and we can do initiatives more and more and more. So I just want to ask of this, and we are very thankful for this.
Well, I think you should contact Karim immediately after after this. I'm a bad example. I mean, I do teach, and it's my way of contributing. And but you know, if you look at the projects that I was talking about today, I'm talking about private projects, which is not a good example in terms of you know, public initiative. But I thought I'd show something a little different than what the others have. I think actually there are tons of NGOs in the country, and everybody needs volunteers. So I'm not sure what you're saying is entirely true. I mean, we're
excuse me, but you're going to see that each of these NGOs are actually working for some sector or some part or some you know, entity. They're always working for a singular area. We're not working as a singular. You know, I'll give you an example. Singapore, you've heard the story before. You know, in 1960s, they were fallen and they were dying and they were in a catastrophe. What they did, they all contributed into giving one entity what it needs to give the government, you know, the power. I know our government is bad and we're in a big catastrophe. But what I'm saying is, if we unite our resources, if you guys unite your resources, you can do something like a bigger initiative. Mr. Karim's initiative is amazing, but it's on a smaller scale. If we combine like all of these imaginative guys and do one big initiative, it's gonna matter for the rest of the world, and people are gonna start noticing us, giving us hope, giving us back. I think that's what I'm looking at, instead of just separating the initiative.
Well, I think you're right in what you're saying, and of course, it would be great. But this is the most difficult part, right? Coordinating all these people together, getting everybody to agree, especially in Lebanon with our big egos. You know, we're all egotists, right? My firm is my name, right? We just got big egos. We all want to be, you know, the center of attention, which is a big mistake, and we don't know how to collaborate. But after all these catastrophes, you know, I think we hopefully will learn. Maybe I should give Karim the microphone to speak to that issue, because it's about NGOs and public. Would you like to take it up?
I haven't understood quite the question, because actually it's kind of, your question comes in form of a
request,
bit of an accusation. Why don't you? Why don't you? So
why don't we? Why don't we?
Yeah,
is what I'm saying.
We do. Yeah, I mean, you're the young. Yeah,
I am the young. I don't have
so
the resources.
so ahla wa sahla. Join us. And we have no name that's kind of a family name on our and that does not mean that there is kind of, it's a matter of competence, and I think also kind of it takes a long time for architects to become competent, because there's a lot of things you have to consider, and we experience that young people come also say, we want to do, well do. Yeah, and you'll see how hard it is, and you'll see how, like, after 2 or 3 weeks, that it's hard work and it's hard labor and it's hard thinking. It is, it's not just, you know, kind of a party. So, but I invite you to join. So no problem. I know.
Does anybody have any other questions for Bernard? The lady, yes, please.
Anybody else?
No? Okay. So I guess that's about it. Karim, Charles, Bernard, thank you so much for your time. We will all be taking a 45-minute break, and we will be resuming at 2:45 sharp.